Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reviews, where today we have a couple of tracks from an act named Relentless Pursuit off of their upcoming album titled Mechanisms of Destruction. And if we switch over to here, Mechanisms of Destructions, this is track 1 and 3 with the first being artificial. So we're going to listen through each of these two tracks from start till finish. We're going to hear what we think. Let's go. Kind of reminds me of the AMD ads from the late 2010s. Sorry to interrupt. I was having a listen to those drums and I was thinking, when are they going to come in with a bit more definition in that low end? They're a bit more sort of kick to them, so to speak. Excuse the pun, but here we go. Lots of tension to those harmonized leads. See, sometimes I get lost in the groove of the guitar riffs and the drums that I forget to focus on what the vocals are saying. I'm listening to the tone of the vocals. I love the growls and I like the single and double tracking they were doing here, but I'm just saying that for the sake of transparency, I suppose. The choppiness is kind of nice as a fun production thing. I get the impression they were trying to turn this into a bit of a power ballad in these hook sections. I don't necessarily mind that. It's a bit of an abrupt change from a lot of the almost tritonish stuff earlier in the track, but is it that we're trying to find a sense of hope or wonderment in our faith in these, the artificial intelligence, I suppose? A bit of panning there with the guitars from left to right. Nice.
Malfunction.
Okay, cool. Almost sort of Meshuggah-ish at this point. I mean, it was just fun little element. It kind of felt a little bit bereft of some of the other parts we've had in this structurally, but at the same time, as this is a concept album, I can't help but show admiration for that. I like that we're taking some risks. that familiar sort of familiar head voice falsetto that almost, is it falsetto? No, I think it's head voice that I've heard a bit of from Relentless Pursuit over the time I've been reviewing them. I think there's a lot of stuff that I like about this track. What do I think it's about? I think it's about our taking a chance with artificial intelligence, trying to sort of imagine what life would be like without maybe ourselves being as involved, taking that leap of faith, trying to form that partnership. That part we have the, say, function, then we have a breakdown, you know, like I'm wondering if that's the transfer over to the AI and trying to establish whether there are going to be wonderful possibilities at the end of that a change of dominion. It's a question that a lot of people are asking at the moment in regards to artificial intelligence. Everyone's got their own opinion on it. I won't go into mine here too much, but all I can say is it will definitely be interesting for sure to see what occurs. I think that the work with the guitar, especially those tritonish kind of harmonized bits of dread at the start of the track, they eventually morph into this more kind of I don't necessarily want to commit to upbeat because there's still this kind of real heavy tone to the guitars and such, but we get this feeling of like, oh, you know, maybe things will be better if we work towards this. Maybe we're working towards something glorious, you know, with the artificial intelligence, the chord choices, the more majorous intonations there within those chorus sections there. Switching into that breakdown later on there with variations in the tempo, I suppose, a mixture between straight and triplets there. There's a lot of range compositionally in this track. I would have preferred a bit more bass at some parts. Not at the start, because I understand the filtering was like a design decision there in the post, but like, am I thinking that part after the function part, there could have been more low end, and I say that as someone wearing headphones where that will not be something that happens naturally. They're very, very picky about that, but either way, still, solid track. I think the subject matter is kind of intriguing, and it'll be interesting to see what we have with the song number 3. Which, as I understand it, is a modified Reconstruction. So let's go, let's do it. Starting with some cleaner leads with a bit of reverb. A tempo. I'm going to give a bit of feedback on this with the understanding that I'm still learning, like with my side of things in regards to production. I think that the strings are sounding a bit blunt. If we could potentially soften them somehow in the mix. It's also that I'm not sure if the tuning of those strings, I assume they're samples or a plugin or something like that. To me, it would sound cleaner if they matched the tone or the triad of the guitar parts. That's all I'll say about that. I understand what we're trying to do here. We're trying to, you know, we add synthetic elements. So I like the guitars by themselves, but then when the strings come in, they kind of poke a little bit.
Will we find favor in this desert wasteland? When the end has begun, the Great One has established a place for us. Will we see His truth before our last breath?
Oh, no. I was hoping we could keep with that groove because it was a nice kind of triplet movement from the strings at the start. We had like straight kind of 8th or maybe 16th there at a slower tempo there with the occasional string accents. Then we move into kind of a talky bit there. This is through composed, isn't it? Hell of a lot low into the percussion though. I want to make it really clear that I don't really have any issues. When I was talking about like, oh, why did it change before? It wasn't that I disagreed with the idea of needing change there compositionally. It's okay to have different sections that perform different functions. We had the build from the guitar, the increase in volume slowly from that guitar, instigating that something would adjust, and we want to keep it similar in consistency and style to previous tracks within the album. So I totally get it. Yeah.
Will we see His truth before our last breath? Will we see His truth before our last breath?
Is that guitar in tune with the piano? I think there's like, it's nice to have the piano outro at the end. I like the fact that we have a bit of color there to necessitate, like that kind of makes you wonder what's going to happen next. It seems like it's concluding the thought process of wondering whether we'll know the truth in our last breath or whether we'll know His truth. I'm assuming there are probably some religious connotations there. Is this album about, I mean, that's an overall kind of conclusion kind of statement to make. What do I think this track is about? I think it's considering maybe our rebirth in the digital age, how religion comes into play with the artificial technology that we've been discussing there, the modified reconstruction. And that's an interesting thing for people to think about, you know, like how religion and artificial intelligence, like how are robots going to vibe with religion? You know, what is that going to be like? There's just stuff that's going to happen over the next while in my lifetime, which I'm simultaneously nervous about, while also being curious, you know. There's just all these different advancements in how they're going to interact and whether things are going to get better or worse overall or just change, be different. But anyways, I think that the different instruments like the guitar, bass, drums, the string parts, even though I didn't really necessarily like the tone of them, I understood the notes that were playing there. There was a sense of tension and meditation there. We did have moments where things kind of relaxed a little bit outside of those strings. Maybe they're kind of like the pulse waves of the brain kind of like kicking into gear, the consciousness. There was a heaviness with the vocals as well, both the single and the growly bits there. And the talking parts where they kind of delayed around the headphones were dope as well. I appreciated the sound design there. Very kind of introspective. It's stuff to think about. And I think that we managed to flesh out that 4 minutes 18 pretty well. Both these tracks are over that 4 minute sweet spot, but I don't think there's any filler within these. But we're going to talk about that more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of these tracks from the upcoming album Mechanisms of Destruction from Relentless Pursuit. The two tracks today, which were Modified Reconstruction, as well as Artificial, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure they're artificial, yeah. So, what do I think this album is going to be about? Overall, I think it's going to be about how human beings interact with artificial intelligence, how the truth of God comes into play here, and all those things intertwined. I don't have all the pieces. For example, we are missing track 2, which I assume is either still in development or, you know, like it's at the very least it's in the oven, and if it's an upcoming album, it's probably not ready for release yet, which is totally fine. But these two songs here that we have, they indicate to me that this could be a really cool album, a nice, really dope concept. And I think the way that the themes are communicated through the lyrics by the singer it's tight. This is some of the better stuff that I've heard from Relentless Pursuit. I appreciate the way that we had our growler, vocal fry technique there was nice and tight for the most part. We were very kind of like deliberate and clear with a lot of our words. That's not always something you get with that kind of style there. I appreciate that was carried over there. The sung parts in the previous track, Artificial, were good. The melodies, I think they worked quite well. I think that we managed to kind of decide the right place for the sung versus the spoken bits, like in Modified Reconstruction there. It was more sort of pensive, asking those questions there in a calmer way for the listener to take it at a more sort of stable level. There wasn't much else around it to overwhelm it. I like that we are varying the way we communicate and express ourselves for the betterment and purpose of the track. We also allowed within these other two tracks that were about 4 minutes each, or just over it, a lot of room for the various guitar, bass, drum, and within Modified Reconstruction we had synths as well as strings as well as keys and such. We might have had other instruments in Artificial, but those are the ones I'm remembering at the moment. I liked the variation with the two there. Relentless Pursuits, Modified Reconstruction seemed a bit more through composed there. We had one section, and then with the guitars, and then the strings, and then we had the talky bit, and then we had the growled bit, and we had bits that were repeated kind of, but like it was more of a journey with Modified Reconstruction there, more of a meditation than anything else. Whereas I think with Artificial, it had more of that kind of A-B structure there with the traditional sort of breakdown and everything like that, several different grooves, and almost a kind of Meshuggah vibe to it amongst the kind of heavier metal bits that I appreciated there. There were no real ultimate, there was a piano-ish kind of instrumental solo-ish bit at the end there, and I suppose you could argue that the arpeggiated guitar bits or whatever with the drums as well, there were breakdowns and there were instrumental moments, but there were no other real main lead elements aside from the vocals, and I think that's okay. There were no points where we overplayed the hooks or anything too much there. We didn't overplay our hand in that regard. The drums throughout were incredibly tight. I liked the variety of different triplet, 8th, 16th, and quarter note grooves there. Very explorative of the drum kit there. There were some interesting pen decisions where, like in the second track, we had the toms on this side, and then we moved the crash cymbals around, which is kind of dope. There was a clear intent on... there was filtering of the drums as well in the first track there. We had got rid of the low end, and then we added a bit more of the mids, and then we kind of let everything go full bore. So it got louder despite us not necessarily playing things differently. I think that's just really cool from an aesthetic decision. The bass, while I would have occasionally liked more bass in certain places, I think that ultimately there was enough low end from a lot of the guitars and bass drum parts a lot of the time to not necessarily need that, especially if we're working with 7 or 8 strings there going into that lower range. Sometimes it can be diminishing returns. I think that for the most part there was enough of a bass response in the low end there. We prioritized our root notes and let the guitars and any synth and key parts decorate the mid to high range as well as the vocal bits when they were there. The guitars with the harmonized leads in the start of Artificial working towards the more sort of anthemic power chordal bits, and the hook lines with lots of chuggy power chordal breakdown bits later on, and cleaner arpeggiated parts in Modified Reconstruction. There was a lot of range with the guitar bits. I can't help but wonder whether the guitar was in tune in the last part of Modified Reconstruction because of the notes that the piano was playing. They sound like they played the same note in a similar range, but they were just slightly up. But it's a very kind of minor thing. Outside of that, I like the sense of dissonance and decay that the vast majority of it had. Even though there was kind of hope in some of the major sections in the previous track there, you also got a feeling that there was a sense of uncertainty there that the guitar tone within itself communicated, but it was also just, it was great to explore that instrument further. The keys that we had in Modified Reconstruction at the end were quite palatable and colorful without being too over the top, and even though I didn't necessarily, again, like the tone of the strings at the start of Relentless Pursuits, Modified Reconstruction, I nonetheless appreciate that we were trying to do something different and trying to give that track its own sort of theme and vibe. Ultimately, I think that the combination of elements within each of these tracks made them compositionally interesting to listen through with the clear sort of transfer between structures. The themes overall were varied there. You got a sense of they sounded cold. There wasn't a lot of warmth there. It sounded like there was almost a lot of resistance to the concepts that we're discussing there, a sense of uncertainty there with a lot of diminished and tritonal and minorish bits there. Even when things got a bit more major in that previous track, it's almost like there's a sense of trepidation of wondering whether human beings have gone too far. And ultimately, I think that if that was the case with the use of those uncomfortable instances harmonically and melodically with the intensity of the percussion low and battering, and when it wasn't, there was just a sense of emptiness. I can kind of relate how it works with the vocals and the lyrics. I think there's a great sense of connection there. The studio recording, mixing, and mastering was solid. Solid. I'm happy with most of it. Again, with the understanding that, like, I think that the leveling in general was pretty good. The EQing and filtering, there weren't any sort of like weird resonant frequencies or anything like that there. Things were nice and wide in the stereo field. There was moving around of different instances and stuff like that. You know, like we had panning automation and such like that. The vocals, they sounded nice and present in the mix. Like, I'd just be nitpicking, man. Like certain little things, if something sounded slightly harder than the other. Like it's a raw, organic set of tracks here where I think, aside from maybe there was like a bit of kind of boominess in like some of the low end of the vocal parts, and occasionally, like it's tricky because like they're playing with expectations now. At the start of Artificial, where like I was like that second round of drums there where it was a bit less filtered, but it was still filtered. I was like, where's the low end? And then it came in. So I think that any of the decisions here are deliberate structurally. I think that the strings that we had in that second track could have been a bit less dry sounding. But aside from that, again, I appreciate the vast majority of what's going on here. There is dynamic range. Things were at the same loudness all the time, and things were still nice and loud without pumping, so bus compression limiting was handled. I mean, effectively, this is my review of these tracks from an act named Relentless Pursuit, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show them some love via the various social medias and their YouTube page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I will catch you in the next review. Spiderhands out.